All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the Fantasy Files podcast, where we talk about our favorite fantasy series and topics. We are your co hosts, Spencer and Gabe, and today we are excited to talk about our first read along, The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. Today, we'll be discussing the first three books in detail. So if you haven't read them, please hit pause, go read them, and come back so you don't get spoiled. But first, before you go, please like this video and subscribe to our channel to keep up with all our series and topic discussions. Feel free to leave us a comment down below to let us know how we're doing or what you'd like to see us read and discuss in future episodes. Or you can find us on Twitter if you look up Fantasy Files Podcast or at Files Fantasy. We'd love to continue the discussion there with you. It really helps the channel whenever you subscribe or like, so please do that and help us grow this into a great community. We also just uploaded a channel trailer. It was my first time doing any sort of video editing, and it was very fun. So please go check that out for a good laugh. It's pretty funny. For this read along, since it is such a large series, we're not going to be discussing spoilers for future books, just in case you haven't read the whole series yet. That way you can read it along with us. We'll do it in chunks of maybe 3 books at a time. Some of the larger books will probably be on their own. But yeah, we'll try to steer clear of future spoilers so it doesn't mess up your reading plan. On each of these episodes, we'll kind of go through our usual outline, and it'll all be kind of the same topics like the magic system, characters, storytelling, new plot devices, and how Butcher grows as an author. And we'll just kind of update it for every new set of books. So for the first 3 books, we'll only talk about how far the magic system is developed in the first 3. And then as we get later on into the series, you'll see the magic system grow. You'll see characters grow. Like Karen Murphy is a very different character at the beginning in these 3 books from who she ends up being later on. So all that being said, before we get right into it, let's talk about what we've been reading and kind of what's next for the Fantasy Files podcast, what you can expect in our next couple episodes. So I have been reading a ton of stuff. It feels like I cruised right through the Dresden Files. I read the first 3. I think I read 1 a day, and I just cruised through them. They're so short, and I forgot how short they are. But other than that, I've been reading. I think I mentioned last time I was reading The Lies of Locke Lamora, and that series, I am in love with it. It's right up there with King's Dark Tidings, and probably not as high up as like Dresden Files, but it was a very fun like fantasy kind of romp, like King's Dark Tidings. There's a ton of problems with it. Like there's several books where it's kind of like, all right, like I don't really see how they got to that conclusion, but it makes up for it by being so much fun. It is just this super, super fun kind of thieving fantasy romp that at the end of the day, I really didn't care that some of the books didn't quite make as much sense. Like it definitely has like its storytelling issues. But all in all, it was super, super fun. Other than that, Gabe, I talked to you a little bit about the Rhaeria revelations, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so I read that right after The Lies of Locke Lamora, The Gentleman Bastards.
Okay.
And man, you know, just to go on a little bit of a rant for a minute, I know lots of people like that series, and I think it's totally fine for anybody to like what they like. But God, I did not enjoy that series at all. I had to stop before I finished the series. I read Theft of Swords, and then I read whatever the next omnibus is, the next like two books that are in one collection. And the first, the Theft of Swords, it had so many problems, but I kind of liked it because I had been reading all this kind of like dark fantasy. And so like between kind of the darkness of Mistborn and then how really dark Lies of Locke Lamora, the Gentleman Bastards gets, I really needed like a bright, fun fantasy kind of thing. And it definitely does that. It's almost like if Disney were to write a fantasy book,
Huh.
everything is like super, super simple. Like there's elves, dwarves, humans, and they all act exactly how you think they would. The storytelling is, for, in my opinion, it was very simple. Like I saw all of the twists coming way ahead of time. Like there's this guy who goes missing in like the third book, and they keep asking like, oh, where is this guy, where is this guy, and there just so happens to be this other mysterious traveler who's like kind of spying on them the whole book, or is like always one step behind them. It's like, oh, I wonder who it is.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that, and the magic system is not it's like very soft magic system. It doesn't explain how magic is done at all. And there's the one girl who actually uses magic. All of a sudden she's like at the beginning she's kind of like this novice, like she knows one spell, and then a book later she's like this crazy wizard who can do all this stuff, and it just doesn't make it just doesn't make
Weird.
sense at all.
It doesn't explain like how she got there?
Not really. Like it explains, like there's this moment with her where she's kind of like, oh, like I think I get how this works. Like you have to do things in this certain way, but
Yeah.
it doesn't like
Like really going
explain
to
like,
depth.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it happens so quick. Like once she has kind of this epiphany, it's like all of a sudden she can do every spell. And it
Huh.
was like, all right, well, okay. But I do I the funny thing is I do recommend it if you have been reading some darker fantasy, or if you have been reading some really complex fantasy and just kind of need to take a break, because I was able to listen to it without ever having to rewind. I think I rewound maybe twice. Um, and you really don't have to pay attention much to what is going on at all. So I kind of think of it like, I think of it like a Disney movie. Like if you've been watching something like Game of Thrones or Mr. Robot or Breaking Bad or something like this really heavy TV show, with all these different characters and complexities, you finish watching the show and you need something kind of chill to watch. Like you need
Yeah.
something that's not going to take a whole lot of brain power.
Yeah, it's
And
like you got to put something on to fall asleep to, and like that would be the Disney movie.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what this series does really well. I think that it's funny enough and the characters are good enough where it doesn't feel like, oh, like why am I reading this? But it gives you just enough of everything to be like, this is all right. Like, I'm enjoying it. I'm able to listen to it while I work, and just kind of not have to think a whole lot.
Yep.
But yeah, the fourth book, to be honest, the fourth book bored me to tears.
Oh no.
I was like, the fourth book was kind of the one where I was like, oh, like why am I reading this? And by the
Yeah.
end of it, I was like, I gotta switch to something else. So I ended up starting the first Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. And yeah, it's good so far. Like I see why people like it. I'm not really sure what it's about yet. It's supposed to be like very uh kind of grim dark, like set in like a darker world and with darker, more morally obscure characters. And yeah, the characters so far seem really well written. I'm only like maybe 3 hours in or so. But yeah, I see why people like it. I have high hopes for it. I'm gonna keep reading and see how it goes.
Nice. I've got a question for you about that first book series. You were the one with the omnibus, whatever that you were talking about, Rye
Oh,
something.
Ryaria.
Okay, yeah. So would you say that that is like, because to me it sounds like more of like a maybe that it's trying to appeal to a younger audience, or like is it a grimdark book? I mean, I don't know.
No,
I've never read it.
no, so it's not grimdark at all. Yeah, I almost would say
Because I was thinking like along the lines of like Scythe, right? So that's like kind of like a more teen-ish book, but also mature at the same time.
right. So
Okay.
I wouldn't say that this is a young adult book. It doesn't really fit what I think of when I think of young adult, but I could definitely see the story being in a young adult book
Okay.
because it is kind of like the simpler, more like morally obvious character. Like everyone is kind of a good guy besides the bad guy who's like a really bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like he's like, it's like it has the villains that like they'll sit you down and tell you their whole master plan kind of thing and like do their evil bad guy rant.
Yep. Yep.
And so it has a lot of those guys, which is kind of like, all right. And the two main heroes, they are, I honestly, I like them, I do, but I was so disappointed with how their characters went because the series was sold to me as these two thieves who take on like big heists and stuff like that. Um, but they're just like morally good. And I know that sounds like a weird thing to complain about, but there's no like they're thieves. They're supposed to be doing all this thieving stuff. And then
Yeah.
the only time they steal anything is at the very beginning of the first book. And there just wasn't that much like Royce and Hadrian thieving duo kind of thing. And they don't really have motivation for anything. Like every book, someone will show up and like ask them to do some sort of quest, whether it's to go save somebody or to find magic item or whatever. And they're just like, oh yeah, sure, of course we'll do it. It's like, what is your motivation for
Yeah.
it? Like,
Why are you accepting that? There's got to be
yeah.
more.
And so it's just like, it's almost like a video game, just like, oh, yep, like accept quest because I
Yep.
need
Yep.
the XP. And so it very much feels like that. There's no real motivation for anything they do. They're just kind of going on this grand adventure for, just for the story of it, really. And so with thieving characters, I was definitely hoping for more of a morally gray character. Like even if they are good guys, like they'll do bad things for a good cause. I was
Yeah.
kind of hoping for that. But yeah, so it's very okay. Like I said, if you're coming off a really complex fantasy book, or if you're just really tired of reading really dark books, this is a very bright, happy kind of series. At least from what I've seen so far, it hasn't been very dark at all. So
Gotcha.
if that floats your
It
boat, I would
does. It totally
recommend
does.
it.
Yep. I'm gonna try it out.
um, all right. So what have you been reading besides Dresden Files? There was something about the price of oxygen or
Oh
something.
yeah, my girlfriend told me about a book, Diary of an Oxygen Thief.
Mm.
And it is definitely not along the lines of fantasy at all. I don't
Oh,
know if I
sure.
really want to get into it, but so that and that was just one. I think that was like a 3 hour read. It didn't take
Oh,
very
really?
long, very short book. But I have before we decided that we were going to do the Dresden Files, or at least the first three books, I went back and read all the side stories like Briefcases And
Oh
the
yeah.
other one, I think there's one more, right?
Briefcases and side jobs.
Okay, perfect. So I read both those. And then I think I read Changes was another one that I read.
Mm.
And then just recently, I thought possibly after this, I might go back to the Iron Druid Chronicles. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that quite yet, but I've kind of had the inkling to do that. So
Okay.
really, it's just been mostly Dresden. It's been further than we are, but mostly Dresden lately.
Nice. Oh, let's talk about what we're thinking for the next episode or two.
Yeah,
Um, so we've been talking about the Scythe series on a lot of these episodes, and we are thinking about, or not thinking about, after this, we're gonna read the Arc of a Scythe series by Neil Schusterman. If you haven't seen our other episodes explaining what it is, basically it's a young adult novel, but it's very well done, and it takes place in the future where everyone can live forever basically, but they have these population problems where they need to control the population because the earth is only so big. And so there's kind of two factions, how I think of it. There's like these people called scythes who have uh, the legal freedom to kill anyone they want, to be able to kind of thin the herd,
yeah,
and to kind of keep population control under control.
yep,
And they there's some that are very bad, and there's some that are very good, some that kill with mercy and some that kill with wanton abandon.
yeah,
And then there's the other major player in the books is this supercomputer, um, the Thunderhead. And basically they are like the internet, and they're involved with every single person. Like they are basically the god of this world.
yeah,
It's like this artificial intelligence that controls everything and has a plan for everything. So it gets really interesting. We have two young adult characters that get kind of swept up into the scythedom, and kind of how they get trained and go on to be the next scythes. And it gets really interesting. We'll talk more about it when we post our episode on it, but I'm looking forward to it because I've honestly kind of been itching to go back to it.
me too.
It's been at least I think the last time I read the second book was at least 2 years ago, and the third book no, the third book came out about a year and a half ago. So I probably read the first two like 2.5, 3 years ago.
Yeah, I
So
recently did. It's probably been maybe 8 months for me, and I went through and I did them all back to back and did a reread of them. And I love this series so much. I'm very much excited to how to talk about it.
yeah, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. All right, so that's what you can expect from our next episode. Let's talk about the Dresden Files.
Yes.
Um, so if you were to tell somebody, and I'm sure you have you recommended the Dresden Files to anybody, and how have you explained it?
Um, honestly, I think I have, and it was to the girlfriend, and basically so the way that I tried to, 'cause she's never read any fantasy, right? So it's coming from a person like me, let's say a year and a half ago, no fantasy in my history at all. I tried to describe it as like, you know, you have this like urban, right? Like urban environment or urban era or whatever you want to say, like it's today,
Yeah,
uses all of today's stuff, but then you like involve like this other, I guess, world that combines with it, and they interact a ton, and it's really cool to see lots of like lore. You know, you got all these mythical beasts and fairies and this and that, and to see them mesh together. I think that's what got me hooked in the beginning, because it's like you have like the series that probably without, I mean, obviously it wouldn't work without, but like without that, it would still be cool. And then you add like all this stuff in, just, I don't know, made it really sweet. And again, I'm not very good at these elevator pitches, never have been, but it's, and she's still hasn't read it. So I don't know. I don't think I did a very good job.
Right. No, yeah, I think you nailed a lot of it. Butcher does a great job with really doing his research on these kind of mythological lore, and how they've been received through history, and just really incorporates it into his books really, really
Yeah.
well. And he puts his own spin on it. So, he has like the base lore for every mythology in the book, but then he's always got his own kind of twist on it or reason for why it is the way it is.
Yeah.
And that's always really interesting. Um, I would probably describe it in a similar way. I would say like modern day Chicago. We have this wizard who is kind of a black sheep of wizards.
Hmm.
And he's not a bad guy. He's actually a really good guy, but he's largely misunderstood. He's a private investigator for his work. And so I always tell people it's like if Harry Potter grew up, moved to Chicago, and became a private investigator.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to describe it.
The magic system is much more advanced than Harry Potter, but I think that gets the general idea across. Harry works with the cops to investigate crime scenes that are magical in nature. I think it's important to say that most of the humans don't know about magic.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of this thing that they're oblivious of. And Harry just goes on these, gets tangled up with different supernatural creatures in each book. And it leads to, you know, one bad week or whatever in his life. I think Jim Butcher said that what he tries to do is every book is the worst weekend of Harry's year that
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
um, all right, so we've talked about what the Dresden File is. Before we move on to like how we found out about the Dresden Files, and I think it's safe to say we love this series. It's probably our number one series. I've said in other episodes that I am completely obsessed with King's Dark Tidings, but the Dresden Files is it's like coming home. It's just
Yeah.
like my home base for reading, and I always love coming back to it. What would you say would be your favorite 3 books out of the entire series? And how would you rank the 3 books that we just read?
So for me personally, I would say that my favorite 3 books would probably be the last 3 books, or
Oh, really?
the current up-to-date ones.
Okay,
Yep. And again, no spoilers, so I'm not going to get into any of that, but that would probably
sure.
be my favorite. And for these books, and we've talked about this a little bit, but I would say that probably the third one, Grave Peril that we read, would probably be my favorite, right? 'Cause I think I think a lot more happens and it gets a lot more in depth versus the first 2, which in my opinion were kind of slow almost. And the
Yeah,
way that they set it up was also kind of slow. So it's like it was hard to, it's not hard. Again, I love the Dresden Files, but it
yeah.
was so yeah, that would probably be the way that I ranked that.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm in the same boat with ranking these. You said third to first, right?
Pretty
Would be
much,
your
yeah.
favorites, yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, mine would definitely be the same way. It'd be like Grave Peril is my favorite. And then next would be Full Moon, and then Stormfront. I was surprised. I almost skipped Full Moon during this reread because
Yeah.
there's literally it literally has like no effect on the rest of the
Yeah,
series.
yeah,
There's
it's like its
nothing in
own
it.
story. Yeah,
Yeah. And so I was like, I remember not liking Full Moon, so I'm probably just gonna skip it and move on to Grave Peril. But I was surprised. I obviously did end up reading it, and I was surprised how much I enjoyed it.
yeah,
Uh, not really compared to the rest of the series, but just compared to the first one, especially. I was trying to get my cousin to read this series, and I was like, "Oh yeah, just start with Stormfront, and then you can hop on the podcast with us, and we'll talk about Stormfront and Grave
yep,
Peril and all that." And he started reading Stormfront, and he was just like, "I hate this." He's like,
yeah,
"This,
yeah,
like this is terrible. Like
yep,
I can't keep reading this." And so I was kind of like, well, all right, that's a weird reaction. And then
yeah,
I started reading Stormfront for this episode, and I was like, man, like this is not a super great book. I think my biggest problem with it was the narration,
yeah,
just
yeah.
because
That was
it's
rough for sure.
yeah, the narrating was super rough, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yep.
But my favorite books out of the whole series are at my number 3 spot. Let's see if I can get it on the camera. Or actually, no. My number 3 spot would be White Knight.
Uh-huh.
And dude, look at this. This is the first Dresden Files book that I ever actually purchased. And
Okay.
look at that spine, dude.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's been opened a few times.
I've That's been read like a dozen
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
My number 2 spot that I love to read whenever I can't decide what to read, it's either my number 2 spot or my number 1 spot. And that one is whoop, can you
I
see
know
it?
it's that weird thing.
Cold Day.
Cold days. Yep.
It's Cold Days. I love this book. It's a super long one, so whenever I need to fill a lot of time, I know I can throw on Cold Days and it'll last me a few days.
Yep.
But I love this book so much, and I don't even know, I can't really pinpoint what I love so much about it. And it's actually been a while since I've read it. I'm sure if I was fresh off reading it, I could tell you exactly why I love it. But I love that book so much. My number 1 favorite is Proven Guilty.
Ah,
Yes, I
yep.
this is my all-time favorite. I love Proven Guilty so much. I always say it was actually the first Dresden Files book that I read.
Okay.
And I always tell people it's like I don't know if you'll remember this Gabe, but do you remember like those CW shows from the early 2000s, like Charmed
No,
and
I
some of those
don't.
other shows?
I don't.
it it reminds me of one of those CW shows, just like really kind of campy, and it was something that like after school or whatever, the whole family would kind of watch later
Yeah.
on in the night. Like somebody would pop popcorn and be like, "Oh, like Charmed is on
What's
tonight," or like The Vampire Diaries on tonight, or whatever. Like all those kind of shows,
yep.
and just like the family would sit around and watch them. And I don't know why, like Proven Guilty just totally reminds me of that. And I'll probably stay away from spoilers when we get to the Proven Guilty episode. I'll be able to tell you exactly why I feel like that. But we get introduced to a lot of people who
Yeah.
stick around in the series for a while after that. One of which someone who becomes one of my favorite characters. So yeah, I love Proven Guilty. It's my absolute favorite.
Awesome.
So let's talk about how did you, I mean, I know, but why don't you tell everybody how you found out about Dresden Files and kind of what your journey was reading through these. I'm curious to know how fast you read through them, but yeah, start with how you learned about it.
Gotcha. So yeah, probably maybe 2 years ago now, would you say? It's maybe been that
Yeah,
long.
yeah.
So 2 years ago, I started working with Spencer. So we were working together and he had this big boombox speaker, right, that he would set out at the job site. We're doing construction. And one of these times he's like, hey, I'm gonna put on an audiobook. And I was like, all right, sweet, let's do it. And he puts on what was the first book? Do you remember the
No,
name?
we were listening at the time. I was listening to
I mean, not
Skin
the
Game.
first. Yeah, exactly. That's what I
Yeah,
meant. The first one that I listened to.
yeah,
And so he was telling me, he's like, yeah, this is crazy. And he's kind of like pointing out all these characters that show up and kind of, quick synopsis of who they are, why they're there, whatnot. And I was like, this was my first fantasy book, right? This is like literally my first time reading like a full-fledged fantasy novel. And I was like, this is crazy. Like in my head, I was like, this is nuts. Like, this is absolutely crazy, dude. I've read sci-fi and some just normal books and whatnot. And I love those.
yeah.
And then you like add in all this like, again, fantasy stuff, right? All the lore and the fairies and this, that, and the other. And I was kind of like shocked. Like, and I think so.
Yeah.
I think we listened to that one, and then I think it took me maybe a week or two to get Audible and to start listening to him. And I think I started with like White Knight, maybe. I think
Oh, really?
or yeah. Well, I don't think I started with Stormfront.
I
Anyways,
I might have recommended White Knight.
okay, yeah.
That's usually a good starting place.
Yep, exactly. And so I read that and I was like, all right, it's time. Like I'm gonna get all the books, right? I'm gonna listen in order. And then from then on, it was like, I mean, I think I'm pretty sure I read them like back to back. And I don't know how long it took me. It was probably a while. I think back then I didn't listen as fervently as I do now.
Right.
But it was I was off to the races, man. It was like it was like it's just crazy. You dive into this world, right? And it like
Yeah.
sucks you in to the point of like, you're just enamored with it and wrapped up in it. And it was super, super cool. And then on, man, it started my whole fantasy journey. Like, and then Spencer, it's funny, Spencer's like my walking book recommendations person, right? So like
Yeah.
any of these fantasy books, Spencer's read and just be like, you got to read this. I was like, all right, I'll read it. And then I read it and it's just incredible. So yeah, that's been it. And even to this day, I've probably read the series through and through 6 times. It's,
Yeah.
2 years. So it's really, really good.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. It's so interesting. Once you kind of learn that these books are out there, then it's like people usually have one of two reactions. If they didn't like the book that much, they'll be like, "Oh my God, there's like 16 more books that I have to read."
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
in the case of us, it's like, "Oh my God,
I
there's
need to
so much
read
content."
these.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
like there's so much to read and it makes me so happy. And I remember my journey when I was first reading them, I was like overwhelmed with options and I went like completely out of order.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
eventually after like 2 or 3 books, I like made my way to the front and like started from there.
Yep,
But yeah, I remember I was like, oh my gosh, I have so many options. I can choose from all these different stories.
yep.
And it was so great.
Yeah, it is.
So I try not to get like super personal or super like emotional on here or whatever, but Dresden Files is one of the things that's worth it. Um, so I first found the Dresden Files maybe 8 years ago or somewhere around there, 8 to 10 years ago. I think it was when I think Cold Days had just come out. Because there was like a really long hiatus between Skin Game and Peace Talks. I think it was about 4 years or so. But I originally found Dresden Files. I started with Proven Guilty, and several years ago now, I had been in a really bad spot in life and I was homeless and doing all this other stuff. And I had ended up in jail. And so the people in jail had been passing around this book, and everyone was like, oh, this book is really good. Like, if you like fantasy kind of stuff, you should read it. And I had been reading fantasy for a few years, but I never knew what Dresden Files was. And so eventually, after like 3 other people, I got past this super broken down copy
Yeah.
of Proven Guilty. And I started with that, and I just remember thinking like, wow, this is incredible. And I actually kept the book. Usually you're supposed to pass it on to the next person,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I
Like, nope.
I I kept it underneath my bunk for like at least a week or two. And I would just like keep reading it over and over. I must have read it like 2 or 3 times.
Wow.
And I was super into it. And then once I got out, I started looking into all these other books, and that's when I bought White Knight. White Knight was the next one that I read. And for the next couple years, I was homeless and doing all this stuff that I shouldn't have been doing. And the only thing that I really owned was a backpack full of the Dresden Files. Like
Wow.
I had like ten books in my backpack. They're all the paperbacks
Yeah.
of the Dresden Files. And there was some really bad nights where, I was sleeping wherever I could. And I had this amazing book series to keep me company.
Yeah.
So if I ever meet Jim Butcher, there will be lots of tears and thank yous.
Of course.
But yeah, so Dresden Files is something that is very close to my heart for that reason. It always feels like coming home, and it feels like whenever I get really into one, it feels like being in a safe place.
Hmm.
But yeah, my journey kind of went from Proven Guilty to White Knight, and then I think I bounced back from there, or I might have gone on to Small Favor, but then I bounced back from there, and I started at the beginning and made my way up to Changes and so on. And I read all the books on paper. I've read them on paper several times because I didn't have Audible back then. It probably wasn't until maybe a year before I showed the Dresden Files to you that I had really started listening to the audiobooks.
Hmm.
And so once I discovered those, I was like, oh, I'm going to listen to these all the time. But yeah, I've read them a whole bunch of times, and it always feels like a great ride. It always feels like you're learning something. Like Harry is very wise, and he kind of has all these like life lesson kind of
Yeah.
proverbial sayings, many of which I have written down on my whiteboard. And there's always something that you can take away from a Dresden Files book. There's always some sort
Absolutely.
of like morality decision, or just like a wise living decision that Harry takes at some point. He takes the time to explain in each book. And that's part of the reason why I love these.
Of course.
um, let's talk about who Jim Butcher is, and we'll talk about the narrator. So what we'll do is we're going to talk about how Jim Butcher is in these books. And as the episodes go on for the next books, we'll talk about how he develops as an author, and the new storytelling devices that he uses. Um, so I am not exactly sure if Jim Butcher would be on the Mount Rushmore of fantasy, but he's definitely the king of urban fantasy.
Yeah.
He, he self-describes his job as talking to his imaginary friends in his head all day. um, Butcher started writing Dresden Files when I think when he was in college, and he wanted to write swords and horses kind of fantasy, like high fantasy, like Lord of the Rings kind of stuff. And he had this teacher that pushed him to write urban fantasy. And from what I understand, she was like, this is like what's going to sell. Like people are going to buy this if you write a certain way. And so he actually set out to prove her wrong. He was like, no one would buy this series, and she had like this template, like she was kind of teaching this template that she wanted him to use, kind of like the Marvel movies, how they all kind of have like a template, like they have a
Yep.
pattern that they use and it makes them lots of money. And so he was like, oh, that's ridiculous. He's like, I'm like a dignified author who isn't going to use cheap tricks like this. And so he set out to prove her wrong. The Dresden Files was actually originally trying to prove his teacher wrong, that these kind of books wouldn't sell. And so he wrote up I think like 50% of the first book of Stormfront, and then he brought it in, and she was like, this is fantastic, you should bring me the rest. And he's like, okay. And so she was talking about the rest of the book. He brought her an outline for a 26 book series with a big apocalyptic trilogy at the end.
Ha.
And she's like, what the heck, like this is crazy. And so that was kind of his beginning of writing this. So, Stormfront came from this college class, and from this teacher who showed him how to sell books, and now we all love it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I'm not exactly sure if he still keeps in touch with that teacher. I hope he does.
Yeah, no kidding.
um he had a pretty big hiatus until Peace Talks came out. Like I said, I think the time between Skin Game and Peace Talks was like 5 years,
Wow.
because Skin Game definitely came out in 2015. So yeah, he took a pretty big hiatus. Everyone was kind of wondering where everything was, but then he came back, and it sounds like he's writing pretty steadily now. So hopefully we'll see the next book pretty soon here. Let's talk about the narrator. This is one of our favorite narrators. His name
Yep.
is James Marsters, and he played Spike from the Buffy the Vampire show.
See, I did
And
not know that.
oh, really?
I did not know that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's Spike from Buffy.
Ha.
And yeah, later on in the series, his work is impeccable. Like it's right up there with Nick Podell and people like that, and Michael Page. And however, the first few books, I've got to say, are pretty rough. They I think Marsters hadn't quite found his voice for the books yet. He didn't quite know like how he wanted Dresden to sound, all these different things. But eventually he got there. The other thing that played a big role in all this was, I think now they use Penguin Multimedia,
Yeah.
and then, but back then they were using this company called Buzzy Multimedia. And it was probably just like a cheaper, I don't know anything about them, but it was probably like a cheaper company that didn't produce high quality results. Plus, you got to remember, Stormfront was written in April of 2000.
Yeah.
So all of these recordings are probably from a long time ago. I don't know how soon after writing the books he did the audiobooks, but it was definitely like at least, 2005 or something, and the technology was not as great as it is now.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the other thing that contributed to that was eventually, I'm not sure which book it was on, but Marsters had a long sit down with Jim Butcher, and Jim Butcher told him how to pronounce every single name. So like at first Marsters is calling Marcone Marconi, and then
Yeah.
Jim Butcher sits him down. He's like, no, it's Marcone. And then he also mispronounced the she. I think he was calling him the Seath or something.
Shift. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, oh no, it's the she. And so there was a lot of different things they worked on. And I think after the first few books, they were in they had many more conversations and kept more up to date with each other on how to pronounce certain things and kind of how Jim Butcher wanted Dresden to sound and all these different things. Let's see. Do you have anything else to say about Jim Butcher as an author or Marsters? Just what you think of either of them?
Not really. Everything you say, I agree with. I think that as we continue the series and get further, I think we'll be able to say a lot more about Jim Butcher anyways.
Yeah.
And even just from Stormfront to Grave Peril, like you could, at least I could
You can tell a
see
difference.
the difference is huge, right?
Yeah.
It's a massive growth spurt, I guess, in the way that he tells a story and, like you said, devices that he uses and whatnot. And then same thing with Jay Marsters. First two were kind of rough. Even at Great Peril, he got way better
Yeah.
in the way that he does things. And the pronouncements, because I was so used to the further books, right? So the
Yeah.
pronouncements, every time I hear them, they bug me. Like
Yeah.
here in Marconi, I was like, it's not Marconi. Or like there's a couple other the shith, right? The
Yeah.
she, that's a different one. And then he says Lananshi different too. And I can't remember the
Yeah.
way that he says it. That bugs me. And there's just a couple other things, but as time goes on, they get way better and ultimately to like this just perfection of
Right.
the way that they do it.
Yeah, he gets it down to a science,
Yeah,
and you can definitely see how starting in the third book in Grave Peril, Jim Butcher really starts thinking about the bigger picture.
yeah,
um Stormfront and Full Moon almost have no consequences on the series as a whole, probably until later on, because we've gotten some hints that the cells from Stormfront are going to play a role later on. But um, yeah, I think Jim Butcher grows so much, and I'm always, what I want to say about him is, you know, I say Harry kind of gives all this wisdom throughout the books and kind of lays all these like proverbial things on us, but really obviously all that is coming from Jim Butcher. And I would love to just like sit down with him sometime and be like, how are you so wise? Like,
yeah, yeah,
like how do you think of all these like really wise things? Like he thinks of things in a very morally good, but also just a very deep ways that I haven't really considered things a lot of the time.
yeah.
And I'm really thankful for everything that he's written. um well, let's talk about the type of storytelling that Jim Butcher uses. um this is really interesting, and I think this is going to be a good discussion here. Is Jim Butcher almost always breaks the rule of show, don't tell. And he does it in a way that isn't really breaking the rule, because there's plenty of showing being done in the storytelling, you know, um, like actively experiencing the events of what's happening.
Yeah,
But because Harry is talking directly to the reader, not only is it a first person, but it's also him talking to somebody. Like
yeah,
it's him either writing to somebody or it's him talking to somebody,
yep,
telling them about these events. And so he'll say things like, straight to the camera, he'll say things like, did I ever tell you about my dad? That's talking
yeah,
straight to the audience.
yep,
And that is so interesting because it gives Butcher the room to explain the magic system and to explain the different characters on the field by having the opportunity to tell the reader, oh yeah, so this person is so and so, or magic is a funny thing, you really have
yeah,
to do so and
yep,
so. And there's so many ways that he does that do not feel cheap. Like never,
yeah,
whenever Harry is talking to the camera, I never really feel like it's cheap or unearned, or just kind of fit in randomly. It always
yeah,
feels really organic because the entire time he's talking to somebody. Um, do you think that at the end of the series, since Harry is talking to the camera, do you think these are obviously his case files, right? Like these are obviously like his journals or something. But I almost wonder if when we get to the very end of the series, if Harry is going to be dying in a hospital or something, and all of these stories are going to be what he's telling the person next to him. Like if Maggie is there and she's
Yeah,
older, and he's like telling her about his life, and like all these books are like him explaining it, because like I said, these books have a really particular, it's not just a first person view, it's him talking to somebody.
yeah,
um I mean, it's us, but for all we know, he's either writing it all down in a journal, or he's talking to like Maggie at the end of his life, telling her about all these cases and how he got to where he is
yep.
now in the future. um I think that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, it would be. And I think it's totally feasible. Like sounds like something that could be what's going on, which is also pretty cool.
Yeah. Another kind of interesting fact, we might have talked about this before, but Jim reuses people and places, like the full moon garage. That gets, no spoilers, but that gets used again in Proven Guilty.
Hmm.
That garage gets used again in a future book. Um, we let's see, the cells will probably be back. Jim Butcher was, I was watching an interview a couple years back or whatever, and somebody was asking him about Monica Sells and her kids, and he was like, unless somebody is dead, they'll probably be coming back. He's
Yeah,
like, he says he called himself a lazy writer or something, and he's like, if I'm gonna invent a character, I'm not gonna just throw it away never to use it again. If I already have a character invented, I'm gonna use them again for something, so I don't have to
yeah,
invent a whole new character.
for sure.
So Butcher sets up questions in the series way in advance. He's had most of these books planned out from the start with a few variations. You know, he said that certain things went certain ways that he wasn't expecting and had to adjust things on the fly. But for the most part, I believe that he knows exactly how this story is going to end.
Yeah,
And we see a lot of his planning, like we see Harry question how his godmother is always so close at hand in Grave Peril. And then many books later in Changes, we find out how she is always so keen as to where he is.
yep.
And it's so interesting. When I saw that in Grave Peril reading this time, I'm like, oh man, I didn't realize that the question that we got answered in Changes had been posed way back in
Wait,
Grave
yeah,
Peril. And so there's tons of Easter eggs, and I'm really excited to go back through the series, even though I've read it so many times. I really want to keep an eye out for Easter eggs and
yep.
foreshadowing.
And that's the cool thing about it is that, in my opinion, however many times you'll read the series, you will always find those things, right? Like you always
Yeah.
like notice a different angle that you didn't notice before. And I think the rereadability is high,
Yeah.
I guess.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a great point that we didn't address earlier, is there's so much to take away from each of these books. On the first read through, you're just kind of trying to understand what's going on and kind of get to know all the key players and just kind of listen to it as
Yep,
a
yep,
fun fantasy romp. And I was so surprised whenever I did my very first read through. I was like, oh, how did I not catch that the first time?
yeah,
And even now, reading stuff like that thing I just mentioned, there's so much to catch. I think you could read these books over and over and over, and still link stuff together. And I think it's right up there with, every time I read King's Dark Tidings, that there's always some new puzzle piece that I'm putting together. Every time I'm reading King Killer Chronicles, there's always something new to put together.
Yep.
And it's always good when an author really has a plan. They know where they want to go with things and incorporate that into their first book to have many Easter eggs as they go on. In this book, we see our first time jump. We see two of them, or not in Grave Peril, we do.
Yep.
At the beginning, we see Harry going in to fight this ghost. And then there's a bit of a, 2 months earlier or whatever it was, or maybe it was hours. Maybe it was earlier in the day or something. But it shows an earlier scene of how we got to this point, and then it comes back. And then later on in the book, we see through a dream sequence, we see Harry and Michael and Murphy and all these people fight the
nightmare.
Yeah, the Leonid Kravos.
Yep.
And that was kind of the first couple time jumps we really got, and I don't think we see another one until White Knight. In White Knight, we see one. In Ghost Story, I think we see a couple, and then we see another one. We see another one or two in Skin Game.
Nice.
Jim Butcher usually puts all the pieces in place for us to figure it out. So Grave Peril, I don't know if it was just because I've read it so many times, but it seemed like painfully obvious that Leonid Kravos was the nightmare.
Yeah.
So, but it's a really good example of Jim Butcher at the very beginning, maybe not the very beginning, but at least halfway through the book, you pretty much have all the pieces you need to kind of figure things out. But it's always a surprise. Like, it's never through a first read, I've never figured it out. He writes in such a way where everything is just kind of deceiving enough for you not to fully grasp what's going on. But in hindsight, all the pieces are there. Like, you could figure it out. And sure. That's one thing I really like about his writing.
Yep, I agree.
Do you want to talk about the world of Chicago and kind of what we're looking at as far as some of like the main players in the series?
For sure, yeah. The world is extremely, I'll be honest, it was probably the whole urban part of the fantasy, right? Like the urban fantasy, like I think that's what drew me in so much, because it's like, I mean, it's Chicago, it's today, right? Like and I think Jim Butcher does a very good job about his streets, areas, locations, parks, the lakes, all this stuff. Like, it's very real. Like, I feel like I could Google these streets, right? And I'll know exactly like where he was talking about, type thing, which is really cool. And then, and then when you add the supernatural players in, right, it's almost like you have these like minus the fantasy, like these political factions that come in and hold different powers in different places and control different things, like Marcone, right? Like, he's like, Kingpin or whatever, and then you got the vampire courts and this, that, and the other. And yeah, I think it creates a very interesting meld of these different ways of thinking about things, right? And like taking what would a normal world would be and adding these other kind of hidden powers and factions and stuff in, and see how they interact with each other and how they interact with the Chicago, like the world, and where they hold power and whatnot. So it's cool.
Do you I agree totally. And I think you mentioned an interesting point about how you could look up these streets and see where they are. In Battlegrounds, I actually, the entire time I was reading it, I read it on paper at first.
Yeah.
And while I was reading it, I had a map of downtown Chicago pulled up, and I would follow them go down,
Oh, that's cool.
like during the
Yeah.
big battle and everything.
Yep.
I
That's
followed
really
where they were
cool.
going, and it was really really fun because they were
That's
real.
awesome.
Yeah, because Butcher was really specific in that one too. Like he was
Yep.
like, we were at the corner of this and this, and it was like, oh, I can look that up.
Yeah.
And it was really fun. I think
That's cool.
he's visited Chicago a bunch of times and is so specific about everything. Like he knows, like before he writes about the aquarium or
Yep.
like the baseball field or anything, like he knows exactly what it looks like. He probably goes there to look at it,
Yep.
and he knows exactly, he knows like every corner, like he knows every room. And
Yeah.
it's really really interesting. He puts a lot of work into that world, and it must be kind of nice having a having somewhere that you can physically go visit. Like it's not like he's just writing about some obscure fantasy world. It's like a
Yeah.
place that you can go, so he can
That's right.
actually go there and make like an educated telling on this place because he can see it firsthand.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to talk about how the humans interact with magic and kind of like why they do or don't believe in magic?
Sure. So I think, and Harry mentions this several times. I think most of the populace, right? Like most of the people, uh, they might see it, they might hear it, they might, get these feelings, but they just physically don't want to believe in it, right? So in that denial, a lot of them don't. They just don't believe it's true. They can justify it, they can change things around. And you see that with even like some of the people in the SI office, right, with Murphy, like just absolutely hands down refuse to believe what they're seeing in front of their eyes.
Right.
And so you have that classification of people where they're just denial, don't believe it, don't see it. But then you have uh different people, and some of them have like maybe a minor talent, right? They kind of like have their foot in the door of this magical world, or just people that aren't afraid to say like, I saw something and like I know that it was there. Like this is not, I'm not gonna fool myself and whatnot. So it's very interesting to see Harry and his team, I guess for lack of a better word, interact with these different people. And I really do think that like, I don't know if it's Rudolph or somebody else in SI is just absolutely doesn't want anything to do with it, right? Doesn't believe in it,
Yeah,
sees all this,
that's
sees a
Rudolph.
Luke Guru in front of him, and he just, nope, I didn't see anything.
Yeah,
And so it's interesting to see him battle himself on that, and Harry try and like, he's like, come on, dummy, like it's right in front of you. I need you to, listen and do your thing. And then you
yeah,
have other people that he meets throughout this journey where it's like, they kind of know what's going on, right? And they come to him for help, like, hey, I believe that you can help me. I believe that you're a wizard and you have these powers and stuff. So it's a cool contrast. And I think without both those sides, it would have made for like, I think you need both those sides, right? You need to have
oh yeah.
both the denial and whatnot to make it a good story. So
Yeah, I very much appreciate the majority of humans not knowing about the
yeah.
magical community. There was another book that I started to read. Um, I forget what it was called, but it was in like a series of short stories kind of books,
Yeah.
but it was part of a bigger series. And it was a guy who was also a private investigator, like a detective or something. But he was like undead,
Okay.
and everyone in the city knew about supernatural stuff. Like it was just normal
Yeah.
to be supernatural. And I'm like, that didn't really fit. Like,
Yeah. I feel
if
like
you're
that would
gonna
ruin the story.
yeah, I'm like, if you're gonna have everything be supernatural, then it needs to be in like a fantasy world. But
Yeah.
if you're gonna have it in like modern day Chicago and have everybody know about the supernatural, like there's way less mystery and it just doesn't make it that much fun.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I really appreciate the ways Butcher has explained that out, and explained why people just can't bring themselves to believe in the supernatural. And it makes a lot of sense the way he explains it, especially in future books. Once we get to Deadbeat, there's a really big explanation of why that's the case.
Yeah.
And we just see a taste of it in these books. So
Yep.
excited to get there.
No kidding.
Um, let's see. Oh, I was going to ask you, have you ever thought about, in our current world, have you ever thought about what you would do if you were faced with some new supernatural stuff? Like,
Several times on several occasions. I've kind of like reading these books, I've always fantasized about that. But honestly, like even for me, like I don't know if I would put myself in the classification of like Rudolph per se, whatnot. I think I wouldn't be opposed, but I think it's so ingrained in me just to not believe in that kind of thing, right? Or like,
yeah,
um, and that there being this entire other world within ours. But if something were to happen and I were to see it, I think I would be open enough. I would be terrified,
yeah,
terrified, but I would be open enough to want to like to seek out more, right? Or to like learn about it or talk to somebody that knows about it. So I don't
right.
know. I feel like I'm kind of like 1 foot in the door, right? 1 foot not, that kind of thing. But I've definitely thought about that before.
Yeah. I feel like that I would be open-minded enough that if if it could even be proven to me a little bit, I think I
Yeah,
could totally get on board with it.
yeah, yeah,
And you know, if things, whether I would stay away from it or not would depend on if things are as dangerous as Harry Dresden's world is.
yeah, yeah,
But if somebody could prove to me that like even in the smallest sense, if they could prove to me that any magic was real, like any even small magic was real,
yeah,
I think I'd be pretty on board with it right away.
for sure. Yep.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about the magic system. Here we have a hard magic system with soft edges, I think. Like I think it's a pretty well-defined magic system. But I think at the very edges of it, there's a little bit of
Leeway.
softness. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a little bit of leeway for Jim to do whatever he wants. You know what I
yep,
mean? I think we have enough of an understanding about the magic system to be able to problem solve, like we were talking about Brandon Sanderson's 3 laws of magic
yeah,
last episode. And I think that Jim Butcher meets those requirements. I think we know plenty about the magic system in order to make informed decisions about how Harry can get out of certain
yeah,
situations or how we could potentially solve certain problems using his magic system.
yep,
Um, but there's definitely a little bit of leeway for Jim to just do whatever he wants,
oh,
especially
for
with
sure.
anything coming out of the Never Never. Like he has so much room to do whatever he wants with that, or the
Yep,
Fae, or so there's a lot of the magic that doesn't need to be explained that Jim can play around with, but most of it we have a pretty good understanding of.
yep, I would totally agree.
Butcher has baked some pretty awesome stuff into his magic system. It's very scientific, and he often explains real world lore through his magic system, like why cameras get all fuzzy when trying to take photos of supernatural stuff, or why the headless horseman couldn't cross the bridge over the river. Did you get to this part about the headless horseman?
I I'm sure. Well, is this in the first three?
Yeah.
Okay, then I did, but I missed it.
Okay. So, for example, in Grave Peril, we see that supernatural beings have to create a body out of ectoplasm when they cross over to our world. Those bodies are held together by magic, projecting from the Never Never. Water grounds out magic and dissipates it. Therefore, if the created body
Okay, yeah.
comes in contact with or crosses over water, it starts to dissipate. Crossing a river would cancel out the magic altogether. Hence why the famous headless horseman could not cross the river when
Yep.
Ichabod Crane was running from him. I'm like, dude, I love stuff like this. Like
Yeah.
I love that, like we did not need that. You know what I mean? But
Yep.
but Jim Butcher is just like,
Like an
I'm
extra
gonna
mile.
he's like, I'm gonna explain why the headless horseman couldn't cross
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
river to chase
Yep.
Ichabod Crane.
That's right. And in that though, like I think that's a good like device, right? That he uses to like teach us about the
Yeah,
basically water and magic, right? Like that's crap that like sticks in your head. And
yeah.
after you read that, I do remember that now. And so
Yeah. I think he uses devices like that to kind of give us like a photographic picture of what he's talking about,
yep,
so that in future books we can always remember that water is bad for magic. And you'll see on all these ghost hunting shows and stuff, like people who go looking for ghosts, like the camera gets all fuzzy or whatever.
yep,
And Butcher bakes that, like that, he bakes that into his series as a huge part of the series, about how Harry's magical field interrupts modern technology.
yeah,
And that's like a huge part of the series, and that's like something that we always see in our real world, like ghost story lore and
yep.
stuff, that cameras get all fuzzy. He puts that right into his series and makes it a
That's
huge
right.
part of the series. I
Yep,
love
massive
that.
part. I do too.
I love that.
He makes it work so well too.
Yeah,
Mm.
it all makes perfect sense. And he takes all these like kind of different, like all this different lore that's in our modern day, like lore of magic and stuff like
Yeah,
that. Because like even I think even the water with magic, like didn't they used to dunk witches in water
yeah,
and stuff like that? And so it's really interesting how he takes all these things from our real world, how we understand magic, and puts them all together in a very cohesive way.
yeah,
Let's see. Hopefully, this isn't repeating myself. All magic has to obey the laws of physics. When producing fire, it acts like it would in any other circumstance. It takes considerable skill and know how to effectively cast a fireball or a beam of fire, because you would have to completely understand how that would work physics wise and create your spell accordingly. So, we probably didn't see it that much in these books, but especially later on. And I know
yeah,
definitely when we get to proven guilty, he explains it a lot. But magic does not just work in any given way. Like you can't just do whatever you want.
yep,
You have to know like the scientific reason and the physics based reason why a certain element would work that way in order to bake it into your spell.
yeah,
And that's something I really appreciate about this series, is that every spell that's cast, every magical thing that's done has a very good explanation for how it works,
yeah,
and it makes sense in our real world kind of idea of physics.
yep.
um so yeah, I really like that stuff. Did you have any favorite spells that you saw in these three books?
Yes. I would probably say he used a lot of his wind spell, right? I really like it's Ventas Servitas is his,
Yeah.
I guess, wind spell. It generates wind. And that's probably that. And then I really like, I know this one might be kind of silly, but I really like when he creates a way to the Never Never, Arparturum.
Oh yeah.
I think that's a really cool spell. And that was one that Marsters screwed up the name of the
Oh
first couple
really?
books. Yeah, he said it really weird and it bugged me, but probably those two. And I think that kind of along those lines too, of you saying like how it's based there, it's got roots in physics, right? And it maintains those roots throughout the entire book. I think that, and we've talked about this earlier tonight too, that that Harry is so good at he's in the story and then all of a sudden he looks at us and says, this is why, this is why this spell works, or this is why that hey, I can't do this because if I were to do this, it would ruin the spell or whatnot. And same thing with like when he makes potions and stuff like that. Like it's all very, very scientific, I guess, for lack of a better way to describe it. But I mean,
Right.
it is a science, like, right? That he uses magic as a science. It's the power of creation. There's like you said, set rules that needed to be followed and whatnot. So, but yeah, I would say Ventus Servitas. Wind spell
Yeah.
is my favorite spell.
I definitely like that. I like how he's able to store a physical energy in a
Yeah.
ring
Okay. Yep.
and
Yep.
then send it out later, and like
That's
he
right.
punches his punching bag and it saves up
All this
like
inertia and motion.
yeah,
Yeah.
like even if he took 10 hits and saved that into his ring, if he let that loose, that's the power of getting hit 10
10,
times.
yeah, in one
And
for sure.
yeah,
For sure.
so whenever he uses that, I like it a lot.
Yep. I would
Uh,
agree.
the other one that was really fun is his at the very end of Grave Peril, he burns the place down.
Yes. Yes.
He
Yes.
burns the whole vampire
Fuego.
strong fuego, fuego inferno, and
Yep.
just like does like this huge fuego spell that he's never done before. And it was because he ate Leonid Kravos's magic
Yeah. That's
in the
right.
dream, and
Yep.
so he had all this extra energy, and he was able to have a little boost. And that was the interesting thing, is I was wondering, now that he's eaten Kravos's energy, I wonder if that like gave him a significant boost in magic, to where in the next couple books now he'll be a good level up. You know what I mean?
So wasn't there, so I remember when that happened, and I'm asking this because I'm trying to remember. Wasn't there, so after he ate Kravos's chakra point, or whatever you want to call it, he basically stole
Yeah.
his magic. Didn't he say a spell that like was, it wasn't his fire spell, right? It was something different. Wasn't it? Or was it the spell you used to like give all the ghosts the power?
Oh yeah, he said
And because he's like, I started speaking the spell. I've never said it before, never heard it before,
right.
have no idea what it is. And that was
Yeah.
from Kravitz, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he did the spell, and whenever he's talking to ghosts, this is kind of a spoiler for later on, but not really, because we see it in this book. Whenever he's talking to ghosts, he says a word.
Yeah.
You know, like remember in Ghost Story, and he says the one word that brings all that once he gets them all together, he says that one word that reminds them of being people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in this one, I think it was remember or something like that. He said like one word after he cast the spell, then he said like
Yeah.
one word to direct them, like remember or something
Yep.
like that. And it made them solidify themselves and be able to attack.
And it
Um,
affect the vampires. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I really like every time he does something completely out of the norm like that. Like
Yeah.
we rarely get to see that kind of
Yep.
spell, and
For sure.
I like those kind of things a lot.
I do too.
Um, let's see what else. What other parts of magic we saw the wolves, all the different types of werewolves,
Yep.
and he does a good job of again taking all the kind of werewolf lore that we have. Ooh, excuse me, werewolf lore that we have in our real world, and puts it into several different types of werewolf in
Yeah.
his series. We see the Hexen wolf that
Yep.
use a belt. We see the werewolves that are like what Billy and Georgia are.
Yep.
We see what was the other one?
The Loop Guru.
The Loop Guru. We see the Loop Guru, which is like a giant monster, which would be
And
your
and and,
typical
and
werewolf.
yep. And the Loop Guru is it's a curse thing, right? Like the Loop Guru had to have been cursed by somebody, which I thought was interesting because I don't know
Yeah,
if I caught that last time.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I really liked everything that had to do with that. It's like a new twist on your typical werewolf.
Yep.
And it was really cool to see all that play out. The other one was the lycanthrope, the people
Yep.
from the Full Moon Garage. And they are basically people who believe that they are werewolves, and they do have additional strength and speed and that kind of thing, but they're in like a human form. It's very Teen Wolf
Yeah,
kind of thing. So it was interesting to see him add all those different elements into the book, so that we could kind of see all these different ways that werewolves are portrayed in modern media and fantasy and lore and
for
stuff
sure.
like that. Um, I think that's, unless you have anything else to say, I think that's pretty much it for magic in these books. It'll grow, and we'll learn a
Oh,
lot more, but
absolutely.
I
Yeah, no.
think that's a good place to stop for
Yep,
the magic. Let's talk about some of our main characters. We'll just lay the groundwork for who these characters are and kind of what they do in these books. So Harry, we've explained, is a wizard for hire. He helps SI, the police, with weird investigations. He's a good man, like a genuinely good man,
yep,
even though he has a kind of a black mark on his reputation. He definitely has some anger, and he has some things that he pushes down pretty deep, but in his heart he is a good person.
yep,
And yeah, he protects innocent people. He goes out of his way to protect innocence. um, he's a strong wizard for his age. And this one I think is interesting. I hope later on we get some explanation to how he is so strong. Um, but he's a young wizard. I think in this book he's like 24, or in in Stormfront he's like 24 or 25, I think. And
okay.
you know, that's pretty young for a
Yeah,
wizard. So he's really strong for his age. He's got a muddy past, and he talks about how he grew up with this guy named Justin Dumorn, who taught him magic. And he was a dark wizard. He used black magic, and Harry ended up defeating him in a duel. And Justin Dumorn sent a demon after him named He Who
yep,
Walks Behind.
yeah,
He supposedly defeats the demon, Harry does, and but the demon is always kind of there. There's kind of this mark on Harry's aura from this demon. And people who see him in a soul gaze see that.
yep.
What do you have to say about Harry
I don't know if I
as a
have
character?
anything else to add other than you said strong wizard for his age, and I'm pretty sure he talks about this in the first three books. Harry's got like he basically the way that he describes himself, he's like, I'm a magical thug, right? I'm very
Right.
powerful, but I lack a certain amount of
Finesse.
control, finesse, control,
Yeah.
and whatnot. So again, that's just barely adding to what you said, but other than that, I don't. I think that everything else you covered was good.
Was there any great quotes that you liked by him, or any like favorite moments of his during these books that you can remember?
I think probably for me, would have been shortly after he burned down. So he burned down, right, the vampires, killed a bunch of vampires, and he's sitting with Michael in the hospital, and he's talking with Michael, and he's just
Um,
like, he's just broken, and he's like, how many did I kill? You know, like,
yeah.
what did I do? What did I do? Why did I do that? And Michael kind of explains to him, he's like, you know, it happened and you had to do kind of what you had to do, I guess, for lack, I can't remember the
Right.
way that they said it, but
No, for sure.
that was probably my favorite, I guess, moment within those first three books is when he kind of like, he reached down and uses such vicious, destructive power to just melt and destroy everything around him. And he had this moment where it's like, what did I do? You know, what did I do? Um,
Yeah.
and so
And
that's probably it.
I think this is the first of us seeing Harry losing control.
Yeah, yeah,
It happens a few more times. I feel like in the later books he gets it a lot more under control, especially by I don't want to spoil it.
yeah, yeah,
So I feel like he gets better about it. Um, but this is one of the first couple times where we really see him losing control and how much it haunts him and how much he has
yeah,
to live with his repercussions
yep,
of what he did. Um, and yeah, I always love seeing these moments where he loses his anger or whatever, and then later on, like he's just having like really honest moments with himself,
yeah,
and he's coming to grips with how he needs to get his stuff under control.
for sure.
One of my favorite quotes from him in Grave Peril was at the very beginning when Leah shows up and him and Michael are standing off against her, and he goes, "Holy shit, hellhounds!"
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and
yep,
Michael goes, "Harry, watch the language." He's like,
yeah,
"You're right. Holy shit, heckhounds."
yeah, yeah, yep, yep,
That one always gets me. I love
yeah,
that.
that is funny. I like that one too.
I love their back and forth and Harry's like kind of irreverent attitude towards Michael.
Yep,
And I just love their friendship in general. But
I totally agree.
and then later on in Grave Peril, there was this really even the way Marsters read it was really impactful. And I probably won't do it justice, but he's talking to Michael in the hospital, and it's just after he lost the sword, and Michael found out that his kid might die in the womb
Yeah, yeah,
and might have a miscarriage. And he's like, "I can't go on, Harry. I can't keep helping you with this mission. Like, I have to stay here." And Harry says something about like, would your kids want you to stay here? Like, what about your kids? Like, don't you want to do this to protect them and stuff? And Michael gets this look on his face like he just got like this gut punch because he's been sitting in this self-pity,
yeah,
and he's like, oh, like getting reminded of his kids and like how he
yeah,
needs to do this to protect them. And then Marsters reads this Harry's talking to the camera, he's talking to himself, and he says, "Way to go, Harry. Jerk those heartstrings like the
yeah,
fucking puppeteer."
yeah, yeah,
And he says it in such a like Harry knows that he's manipulating him. Like, or Harry knows that he is manipulating Michael,
yeah,
and he feels like crap about it because he needs Michael there, but he has to go for a really low blow to get him in on the mission.
yeah,
And so he just has this moment of, God, what am I doing? And
yep,
was it was it one of it, oh, it was in Stormfront where he feels bad about scaring Monica Sells. He goes to her house because she's not answering the phone, and he shows up and he scares her so that she'll give him information. And then he was like, "Way to go, Harry! Like
yeah.
killer
Look at you.
killer of mobsters and frightener of women. Like
Yeah,
you're such a
yeah,
great person." And so he has like this very self-deprecating but honest kind of attitude. And I always love those moments because it's like, yeah, I mean, that's
for
you
sure. I
you
mean,
have to
yeah,
live with that
that's,
now.
yep.
Um, well, if that's all we got to say about Harry, we'll go into I'll go into some of my favorite moments later on. But let's talk about Murphy. I think
Okay.
this is a really interesting one. And I have something that I want to say about Murphy, but I want to hear what you think about Murphy first. Just kind of like as a character in these three books. Were you surprised to go back to these books and see what kind of character she was at the beginning? Because I feel like I always kind of forget.
Oh, no, no, of course. Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely interesting com compared to who she is later on, whereas she is in this three books, like again, I won't ruin anything, but like so Murphy, the way that I look at her now, right, in these first three books, is she is a hyper focused, work oriented, like just like workaholic, right? Like this SI is everything. At the same time, though, she's like, I mean, she's a cop. Like she wants to help people. She wants to make sure everybody's safe and whatnot. And I think that in these first three books, she's using Harry as a tool, right? Like I think they're kind of friends, and I think they
Right.
have somewhat of an acquaintance. You know, they always kind of flirt with each other and this and that. But I think that now she's very much about, I guess, you know, using him to figure out what's going on, which is not bad. I mean, that's the whole point of him
Sure.
being a PI or whatever they
Consultant.
call it, consultant for SI. Exactly. And I think, well, even in the first three books, I think that there are moments uh, where she grows as a person, right? Especially when Kravitz gets to her, right? And messes with her
Yeah.
head, screws her up. Um,
That's a
I think
huge
that's
turning. That's a huge
huge
turning
turning
point.
point. Huge
Yeah.
turning point. Exactly. I totally agree. So I think after that, that's when uh she finally like realizes like how real all this is. Maybe if for I don't know if that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Um and so yeah, I really like Murphy's character. I like Murphy's character a lot more later on than
Right.
I do right now.
Yeah.
But I like Murphy. I think she's an integral part in this entire. Without Murphy, you wouldn't have the Dresden Files. Um,
Correct.
and
No.
so,
Yeah, that's
uh,
that's all extremely well said. Especially um her using Harry as a tool. I think
yeah,
that that is so that is so exactly what their relationship is.
yeah,
She does not see him as a person. She sees
yeah,
him as a means to get her bad guy.
yep,
And so with Harry, she doesn't really have any, even outside of romantically, like she doesn't
yeah.
have any real love for Harry. Like she
No, for
doesn't,
sure. Yeah,
like he's kind of a friend and she's happy for his advice, but she would just as soon throw him in a jail cell.
yeah,
um, and she doesn't trust him at all. And so it was really interesting to go back to these first books
for
and
sure.
see how she acted. Um, the thing that I wanted to bring up, this is something that I read maybe a couple of years ago, or maybe I saw it in an interview. So Jim Butcher calls this, I think he calls it the idiot rule. And basically, what it is Harry is a wizard who has been in the wizarding world for many years now. And we are joining him at age 25 when he already has a lot of this magic stuff figured out. And so, as a device to inform the reader as to what is going on in the scene magically, uh, Jim Butcher uses two devices. Either he has Harry talk directly to the camera, or he has an idiot in the room who asks Harry questions on our behalf.
Yeah,
So, so on a crime scene, Murphy will ask him like Harry will say something like, "Oh, this like magic thing, whatever," and she'll be like, "Why, why is that important, or what does that mean?" And
yeah,
he'll be able to explain this magical phenomenon that is going on in the crime scene or wherever to really to explain it to us.
yep,
And it kind of gives the reader this what's the word, kind of this break, so it's not being explained directly to us. Like it kind of makes us not feel as stupid for having to ask the questions, because there's this other person in the scene who is
it's asking
asking the
them. Yeah,
questions. And it kind of gives us a break from Harry talking directly to us all the time. I would say that Murphy is one of these people.
yeah,
I would say that Butters later on is one of these
yep,
people.
yep,
And oftentimes, Harry is the idiot who, like, whenever there's anything that's above Harry's knowledge,
yeah,
he is the idiot, and Bob is the person explaining to him.
yeah,
So Harry is often the rule of idiot, the idiot rule when he's with Bob,
For sure.
because Bob explains all this high level magic stuff to him, therefore explaining it to us.
Yep.
And I think that is such a really good way to like really sneak in this information so that it's not just being told directly to the reader.
Yeah.
A lot of books, especially the Ryaria books that I just read, a lot of the information is just kind of explained to you in it's just kind of put out there. And this feels like a way better way to get the information. It feels organic. It feels like it's part of the scene, and it doesn't feel like ham-handed,
Hmm.
like it's just getting pushed into the scene. It feels natural.
Yep.
Um, so Murphy, we see her flirt with Dresden a couple times in these books. I can't remember exactly when, but she's obviously like a possible love interest kind of person. She hires Harry for special investigations. She is a cop that works in this place called Special Investigations, which doesn't outright investigate supernatural things, but anytime there's like a weird case, she'll get called in, right?
Yep.
And so she kind of gets handed these cases. Like at the beginning at Stormfront, these people have these hearts that have been burst out of their chest, and they're like, oh, we'll hand it off to SI because we have no idea what could have
Yeah.
possibly done that. And so then she brings Harry in, and she often in these books threatens him with if you have information on this, or if you don't tell me what's going on,
I'm gonna arrest you.
then yeah, I'll
You're gonna end up in
arrest
a
you.
jail cell. Yeah.
And Harry, something I didn't mention about the magic system is we also have the White Council to deal with,
Yep.
and we haven't really met them yet, but Morgan is from the White Council, and he is looking for a reason to catch Dresden doing dark magic. And so Murphy often asks him to figure out how a crime is done, and he's like, you don't understand what kind of trouble that'll get me in. Like, I'm being
Yeah.
closely watched by this wizarding police. And so there's kind of that conflict there. Um, yeah, I definitely like Murphy as a character, especially as the series goes on. And I'm excited to I can't quite remember how her character changes in Summer Night, so I'm excited to see that.
Yep.
Let's talk about Michael. He's,
Okay.
for lack of better word, he's straight up a paladin.
Yeah.
Like he is like the most paladin that's ever paladined. And he fights evil with Harry often. They are, I think, in Grave Peril, they're not quite best friends, but they're good friends who have gone on more than one or two missions together.
Yep.
And Harry knows that he can trust him.
Yeah.
Um, Michael is kind of our moral good. So anytime Harry is considering doing something sketchy, Michael is always there to pull him back from the edge.
Yep.
And, that comes into play a lot more in later books. And we really see Michael fulfill his best friend role and moral good, moral high ground role later on.
For sure.
Um, here's the interesting thing is Michael is like a Christian Catholic kind of person, and I believe I don't know if Jim Butcher is a Christian or Catholic, but from what I've read, I think his dad was like a pastor.
Mm.
And so, Harry knows a lot about Christianity and Catholicism,
Yeah.
and he writes it into his books, and I never feel like he does it a disservice. I never feel
Yeah.
like he is using it improperly. He's very knowledgeable on his Bible verses and on how he portrays Christianity. And
Yeah.
a lot of things Michael says A lot of times he gives some wisdom to Harry. I'm like, oh, that's something that like I probably would have heard in a Bible study or something.
Mm,
And yeah, I really like Michael's character for that reason, and I really like how I really like the care and respect
yeah,
that Jim Butcher has put into his series regarding Christianity. Because I've read a ton of books that have kind of like the Christian type religion, and it's always like making fun of it. It's always like, you know, something about a savior complex and all
yeah,
sorts of stuff. And I just really appreciate how much care and love Jim Butcher has put into putting that into a series.
for sure.
Um, do you have anything to say about Michael? Any favorite stuff about him or?
Yep, I have a couple things I'd like to say about Michael. Um, I want to say that still to this day, Michael is one of my favorite characters in the entire series.
Oh yeah,
And I think the reason why is because part of it, first of all, I'm so like obsessed with the power that he holds, right? Just like it is this ultimate power, but with the ultimate power, there's like, you know, these limitations obviously like that he has to follow, right? Has to always be for good no matter what. He has to have pure intentions of heart, this, that, and the other. But I think with that, like the whole faith magic thing has always interested me a lot. And so watching you know, Michael use his sword and battle with Harry, like even in the future, was always just really cool. All those battles were just, you know, he's yelling in a what is it? Italian? No.
no, it's Latin,
Latin. Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking of. He's yelling in Latin and just like the sword lights up, just super cool.
like
Um,
Dorme Sordius and like
yep,
all
and
this cool Latin
yeah, and
phrasing.
he's like, "In nomine Dei." That's another
Yeah,
one. That's
yeah,
a really cool one. And
yeah.
so I just love that. And then I think, and you've already said this, but I think having Harry having Michael is like this, like it's like cornerstone, right? Like
Right.
somebody that he can always, no matter where Michael is, no matter what's Harry's done, like Michael will always open his door for him, right? And so having that for Harry to be able to fall back onto and to use when he needs it and get perfect advice every time and get the love, you know, brotherly love that he needs, I think is really cool. So I'm appreciative of Michael, you know, for being that person for Harry. So
Oh
I really
yeah.
like Michael a lot. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. And I think as far as Michael's faith magic, that's always really interesting to see,
Yeah,
especially because Harry Harry recognizes it as magic, and or if not magic, like a power, like he can sense
yeah,
it.
yeah. He can feel
And
it, the hum of the magic and the power from yeah.
right. And I think it would be so easy for Jim Butcher to write this guy in and have him be a Christian and like be a paladin or whatever, but not really like maybe give him power, but like in like a magical way, like in the way that Harry has power. Like he could
Yeah,
have easily done that, but he makes it different. He makes it
yeah,
like this power is from his faith and it's given to him by the Almighty and by
yeah,
like the angels and stuff.
yep,
And it's like a true, like it's not Harry's magic,
yeah,
but through Harry, we can see that it is very real. Like we can see that it is like it's not just this thing that Michael thinks he has. Like
yeah,
Harry can sense this magic and he gives it the due respect. And I always really like that about any of the fights with Michael or any of the time he uses his magic, or even
yep,
when there's been scenes where it happened in one of these books where Michael like prays with him
yeah.
and
And
Harry's
Harry's like,
like,
I could feel the power surrounding him, and
yeah,
yeah,
he's like, I felt this glow like creep down me. And I was like, man, that is really cool that Butcher took the time to really put respect on the way Michael uses his power. And
for sure.
just the even if Jim Butcher isn't a Christian, the research he must have done, he got it all so good. Like so
Yeah,
many people screw it up, but
yep.
he did it really, really well. All right, should we talk about Susan?
Sure. Let's talk about Susan.
So Susan is Harry's girlfriend starting in, I think the first book is when they get together, or was it
Yep.
the
Or maybe second. And maybe
second? Yeah,
they start talking in the first book at some point,
right.
maybe.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
yeah.
by the second book they're together. She's his girlfriend, and she is a reporter for the Midwestern Arcane. It's kind of like your National Enquirer and those kind of, magazines that you see up on the stands at the checkout and that says like aliens are invading and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and she plays kind of a minor role up until the third book. She's just kind of there, and she I would say in the first book she kind of uses Harry to get a story, but then they really start caring about each other and they start like dating for real.
Yeah.
But yeah, what is there to say about Susan? She becomes a vampire. She
Yep.
in the third book, she gets taken up by the vampires because she's kicked by Thomas, which I forgot about.
Yeah.
And I have no idea how Harry ever forgave him. Like
Yeah.
what? Like that, I totally forgot he was the one that kicked her into
Yep.
the mosh pit of vampires.
Yep.
And
Yeah. That was
yeah, it's pretty messed up. And
pretty
so
rough.
so yeah, she becomes a half vampire, and Harry finds her at the end of the book and is just like in tears and like gets her to help him kill Leonid Kravos. But yeah, she Harry, one of my favorite moments is Harry tells her that he loves her.
Yeah.
And Grave Peril for a long time was in my top 3 favorite books. And I think that season, or that scene was why,
Yeah.
was because it was so emotional. And he, James Marsters does that scene really well. And he's just like crying. He's like, I love you. And it was just this whole thing throughout the whole book, where he was like debating saying it earlier or not.
Yeah.
And, there's, do you know much about the upcoming book after 12 months called Mirror Mirror?
No.
It basically mirror,
Another Dresden Files book?
yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't.
And mirror is the one after 12 months, and it is about Harry going into a alternate dimension, stemming from the events of Grave Peril if it had happened differently.
Oh.
And I'll talk about it more down below, but Susan, a lot of people think that because it's based off of a decision that Harry makes in Grave Peril, a big decision. And some people think that the decision is either telling Susan at the end, not telling her that he loved her,
Oh, yeah.
or it's telling her that he loved her way sooner in the book so that she wouldn't go to the vampire place, the
Interesting.
vampire party.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't really know what else there is to say about Susan. She's kind of a plot device later on, but for
Yeah.
now
I was gonna
she's
say,
kind
yeah,
of
for
like a
now there's
heartbreak.
not a whole lot. I agree.
So then let's move on to the White Council. We kind of already talked about this.
Yeah.
They're the wizard police. The only one of them we really see is Morgan. And we know that Harry has this doom of Damocles hanging over him. So if he gets in trouble with any black magic, if there's any one tiny thing that he does that is considered black magic, Morgan gets to kill him. And so we kind of see that sometime in Stormfront.
Yep.
Thomas, we don't know much about him because we are introduced to him in Grave Peril.
Yep.
He is a white court vampire. And the big question is, why is he helping Harry?
Yep.
So Thomas has a little strumpet, a little Justine
Yeah.
that he totes around with him. It's like his girlfriend, or she's his girlfriend. And so the White Court, they are vampires, but they don't feed on people through blood. They feed on people through sex
And lust and
and
whatnot. Yeah.
lust. Like they like emotions during sex and other activities, lust and things like that, like kind of generate off of a mortal like heat. And the White Court vampire like soaks that up and feeds their inner demon. And so that's what Thomas does. There's not much to say about him until later
Yeah.
books, but he kicks Susan into a pit of vampires. Before that, he was helping Harry. He returned Amarachius
Yep.
to Michael, and I honestly forgot how Michael got that back until I reread this
Yep.
last time. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Thomas brings it back. All right, let's talk about Bob the Skull. Last one
Oh,
here.
Bob the Skull.
The sexual deviant. He
The sexual deviant. Exactly.
he informs us as the reader to help us understand the wizarding world. He's a wealth of knowledge and an air spirit of intellect that Harry wasn't the one who trapped him in a skull, but Harry inherited him. I'm not sure if the rest of that is a spoiler or not, but Harry inherited Bob. And yeah, Bob is just this wisecracking, lecherous, uh super horny skull.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he is often the device. He's often the device that gives us information through Harry about high magic, some of the more difficult magic and the stuff that Harry doesn't know. You got anything else to say about Bob?
I don't.
Well, one of my favorite quotes from Bob was I think it was full moon, and Harry comes in the room and he says, wake up, sleepyhead. And Bob says, oh, sleepyhead, that's rich, Harry. With a sense of humor like that, you could make a good living as a garbage man anywhere in the country.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And then the other one he said that I liked, because there's only I like this because of one particular word in the sentence. Bob says, I was seducing shepherdesses when you weren't a twinkle in your great grandcester's eye.
Yeah.
And I love the word grandcester.
Yep.
um, do you have any other characters you want to mention? Was there anybody else that we didn't get to?
Let me think on that. Keep going. Let me think.
Okay, I'll talk about this other quote that I really liked
Okay.
from Full Moon. Agent Denton had gotten a soul gaze with had a soul gaze with Harry near the end of the book, and the big question is always, what do people see when they look into Harry's eyes? Because we know that both people see each other's souls, and people are often terrified after seeing into Harry's. Marcone wasn't shaken that much, but Denton said, and I thought this sentence specifically was so interesting. So he's saying this after whatever he sees in Harry's eyes. The first thing he says is, no, I don't believe in hell. I won't let you. What does that tell you about what he saw in Harry's soul? I think it means that when he saw into Harry's soul, he saw somebody who will send the unjust to hell. The person who will stand up for the innocent and has no qualms about not only killing people, but like wanting them to suffer for their crimes,
Yeah, yeah,
for their injustices. And I think he sees Harry as kind of this like avenging person, this violent avenging person who will send you to hell for doing like what you're doing. And I just thought that was a really interesting quote. I had never caught it before, and I had never remembered any of the other people who had soul gazed Harry saying anything similarly.
yep.
And so I'm like, wow, that's an oddly specific thing to say.
Mm,
That's just
yep,
weirdly
for sure.
specific.
It's
Like,
planted there on purpose.
yeah, like no, no, I don't believe in hell. I won't let you. Because most people come away like, holy crap, like you're super strong or you're super violent or
Yeah,
whatever. But what does hell have to do with what they see in Harry's soul?
yep,
That's the interesting thing.
for sure.
Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much all the quotes I had.
Nice. I did
Um,
not think of any other characters really. I think the next big player comes in the next book, so that will be discussed later.
okay. Uh, so let's talk about, man, we're pretty close to the end here. Let's talk about our favorite moments or our most emotional moments. Was there any that, I know we kind of talked about it a little bit, but was there any right off the top of your head that you really liked?
Yeah, I mean, I would say again, and I kind of already said this, but it was the one that stood out the most was by far the moment at the very end between Harry and Michael when he was laying in the hospital. Um, and then of course with Susan, I think that whole scene, like where he's trapped down there with Justine and Susan, and I think that his and Justine's interactions, I also really enjoyed the way that he kind of saw this other side of Justine, right? That was very messy and very disturbed and very kind of poisonous, I guess you could say, for lack of better words. That was very interesting, and seeing him become kind of this like comfort for her, right? Um and just working through that with her and learning more about her was also really cool. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's probably it for me.
Yeah. And especially when he, at the end of Grave Peril, he gives her the ring.
Yeah.
He like fumbles out this cheap ring that he bought,
Yep.
trying to propose to her, and she couldn't do it.
She says no.
And
Yeah.
that was so sad. And then
It was. It was.
the very end of the book is, I got sent a postcard from some Miami or something, um, with
Three
three
words on it.
words on the
Yeah.
back. I'll let you
Yeah.
guess what words those
Yep.
were.
Yep. That was pretty powerful too.
Yeah. Actually, oh, you know what? While I go through these, I don't have my phone on me. Can you look in your texts and find that quote that I sent you of what Dresden says at the end of Stormfront?
Yep.
Um, so my other favorite moments were Harry's first meeting with Marcone. That was really fun. We just saw these two, you know, deadly people meet and soul gaze each other. And Harry was a little shaken from Marcone's soul. He was like, "Oh man, this guy's dangerous." And Marcone wasn't shaken by Harry's at all, really, at least not on the outside. Um, but they have like this respectful understanding of each other that they're both dangerous. Um, and I liked how Harry kept saying, uh, I kept feeling like he was gonna say, "Go get him, champ," or something, because he looked like the assistant coach or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, everything with Marcone was really good. Uh, was it this book where Harry goes to the varsity, the bar that Marcone owns, and goes to get his hair back or whatever? Was that in Stormfront?
It happened within the 3 books. I
Okay.
don't know which one, but I'm pretty sure that that happened. Yes.
Because I really like that interaction too. Because Harry goes in there and Marcone has this respect for Harry, and Marcone shows that he has some level of honor, um, because he's willing to, not believe his guy, like his guy that he's got working for him. He asks him, like, do you have Harry's hair? And then I think he kills him or beats the hell out of him or something. And so he's willing to work with Harry and to give up some of his own guys if he thinks they aren't playing fairly.
For sure. I found this quote.
Okay, so
Okay,
do you want to read it as dramatically as possible?
I will. My name is Harry Blackstone, Copperfield, Dresden. Conjure it by your own risk. When things get strange, when what goes bump in the night flicks on the lights, when no one else can help you, give me a call. I'm in the book.
Yes.
Yes.
So that was the very last thing that was said in Stormfront. And listening to that on the audiobook, I got like chills up the back of my spine
Yeah.
just because it felt very much like how at the end of like a superhero origin movie, how Spider-Man will be like, I'm a protector of the innocent. With great power comes great
Yep.
responsibility. And
Yep.
if there's anyone in danger, like I will. It felt like very much like one of those monologues.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, I was just like, let's fucking
Yeah.
go. Like,
Yeah.
let's
Yep.
go, dude. Like
For sure. For sure. That is
it
cool.
it felt very, very proper for the ending of that book. I'm like, man, this is the start of this series where Harry just kicks ass and he just
Yep.
like protects people and he just keeps going and going. And it starts with this monologue of just like, I will protect people and I am Harry Blackstone Copperfield Dresden, conjure by it at your own risk.
Yep.
Like just laying it all out there.
For
I
sure.
I really, really, really like that.
Yep. No, that's a good one. I totally agree.
Um, so I talked about this earlier, but Harry tells Susan he loves her. That was a super impactful moment. One of the reasons why I really love Grave Peril.
Yep.
Um, Harry Fuego pyros Bianca and her retinue. Harry's first massive out of control spell. We see major ramifications from this, leading all the way up to changes.
Yeah.
This one event sets in motion some crazy events, like a snowball effect of what the rest of the series will be. And I really doubt that when Grave Peril first came out, people knew how significant this event would be.
Yep.
And I can't remember if it was Fuego Pyro or Fuego
It
Inferno.
was. It was Fuego Pyro. I changed it
Okay.
because I remember it. He's
Oh,
like he's
nice.
like he's like Fuego, Pyro, Fuego, and then burns
Yes.
everything to the ground. Yeah.
Yes. That's right. Um, yeah, that was a great scene, and we just see him like really, really let loose and kind of lose control of his
Yep.
magic and just let the magic do what it wants to do, and it just killed everyone.
Yep.
Um, yeah, that was a great one. Harry visits the Cells Lake House for the first time and proves to be very smart. He surprised me with his deduction of the empty trash can. It was something that I would not have considered if I was in his situation. And it just made me think like, oh, this is the way private investigators think. Do you remember this?
I do. I can't really remember what his deduction was, but I do remember the part.
So he goes to the lake house and he doesn't see anybody, and the trash cans were not at the end of the driveway, they were up by the house,
Okay.
and he looked in them to see if there was trash and there was no trash.
Yeah.
And so at first, I would have thought, okay, whatever, but
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
he makes this deduction where if Victor Sells had been staying at the house, threw stuff away in the trash can. If the trash can wasn't completely full, then he would have just left it. He probably wouldn't have taken a half empty trash can up to the top of the thing. And
Yeah.
even if he did, the trash can would still be at the top of the driveway unless he paid the garbage man very well to take it back down to the house, which is
Yeah.
unlikely. So therefore, you can deduce that he's been there. He took it up to the driveway, it got taken out or whatever, and then he pulled the trash can back down to the house.
Ah, okay. Yep.
And I was like, oh man, like that is what a mundane thing to look at and
Yeah,
make such a smart deduction from.
for sure.
I was like, man, I'm always really impressed whenever Harry does these little private investigator things, and or he'll like read someone, like I could tell by the set of her shoulders that she was like thinking this or whatever. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm always really impressed whenever Harry does something like that. And for Jim thinking of that,
No kidding.
that was a very interesting way to think around that. So let's talk about future book questions and theories. We only have a couple from these three books, but unless you had any favorite moments, did you have any other
Nope,
favorite
I
moments?
think we covered mine.
Okay. So it's a popular opinion, one that Butcher has expressed, that we will see Monica Sells and her children once again in a later book, probably as we get closer to the end. Like I said earlier, he doesn't, want to waste characters, and he said that we will see at least her children again.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to see what they think of Dresden. Like if they are upset that Dresden killed their father, even though
Mm,
he was kind of a bad guy.
yeah,
And so that'll be an interesting thing as the books goes on to keep an eye out for the Sells family.
for sure.
And I'm especially interested in any ramification from Victor Sells, because just like we have ramification from the events of Grave Peril, I'm interested to see if anything about Victor Sells comes back to haunt Harry. Jim has also said that Faith, the girl from the Dresden Files prequel short story, is supposed to somehow kick off the apocalypse in the final books.
So that doesn't ring bells to me. Faith does not ring a bell. I don't know if
So
I have missed that story or if I just don't remember or,
so there should be a short story in Side Jobs
okay,
called A Leap of Faith or something about faith. And Harry basically saves this girl. It's a super short story,
okay.
but Harry basically saves this girl from a troll. And that's where he meets Murphy for the first time, when she
Oh,
was still a
okay,
beat cop.
okay, okay, okay.
And so the girl, Faith, that he rescued is somehow going to be involved in the future of, for the big apocalyptic trilogy.
Okay, cool. I'll have to go back and reread that one, I think.
Yeah. Well, that is really all I have. Was there anything else you wanted to say about these books in particular, or the Dresden Files in general?
I probably not with what we read so far. I think that as we do, the next couple series of this, I think there'll be a lot more to add, but I think we did a pretty good job.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say for these series, I almost wouldn't recommend reading the first couple
Yeah,
if you're a new Dresden Files listener. I just told my cousin to start with Summer Night. I was like, you should hop over to Summer Night because I can explain everything to him that's in Grave
yep.
Peril. Um, I'm like, but I think Summer Night is really where it starts to genuinely pick up. Um, Yeah, we'll keep going with Dresden Files. It'll probably be an every other episode kind of thing, maybe.
Yep.
I know our next one will be the Scythe series, so get ready for that. Read those three. Neil Schusterman, Scythe, and yeah, join us for that. Um, there we go. There's the outro music. All right, everybody. Well, that is going to wrap us up. Thank you all for listening to our discussion on the Dresden Files. If you would like to help support the channel, please like and subscribe below, and feel free to leave us a comment or two if you'd like to participate in the discussion, or if you'd like to suggest a book series or topic for us to cover on the show. You can also check out our Twitter profile. Just look up Fantasy Files Podcast or @Files Fantasy to join in the discussion there. All that being said, thank you so much for listening to the show. We'll be back next time with a discussion on the Scythe series by Neil Schusterman.
Okay, I gotta pee.